Our guest this evening is Paul Rosenberg, who envisions this, an invitation for us all to go soul first into a future where 12, 12, 12 is the first official day of the rest of all time. Paul believes if we can all just agree, we will all instantaneously be set free. Paul has left a successful and lucrative career as a film producer to explore what will be necessary to facilitate the next evolutionary step for humanity, so badly needed today. Tonight he wants to go public with the answers he's found. You as listeners and we as your co-hosts, Burl and Mary, right along with you, will need to decide whether or not these are ideas we should endorse. Right or wrong, Paul speaks deeply from his heart, and we are pleased to give us all this opportunity to listen and respond.
Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure, Mary. I certainly appreciate the offer to come on your show.
Yeah, we're glad to have you here and interested to find out what goSOULfirst is all about.
Well, it's kind of obvious just with the name. You know, it seems like goSOULfirst is sort of, a higher consciousness, a spiritual sort of way to go through life as opposed to mind first. And of course it is. And that's really what I'm here to talk about. But it's all actually based on what I've been working on for the last 12 years, which is called GEMATRIA. And it's actually kind of the cosmic code of the universe, and that everything is powered by spiritual energy. I mean, even science is finding the same facts now, that there's no such thing as just empty space. There's filaments and fibers and vibrations through everything. And that's actually spiritual energy. And what your soul actually is like it's a decoder. And when the energy goes into your soul is like a lens, and it literally separates the energy into all the different variables. So when you go soul first, you're actually syncing yourself up with sort of the natural laws of the universe, and you're in harmony with the universe. And so that's actually how powerful it is. It literally is, sort of lining everything up so you're able to tap into all the power of the sun and the universe and the solar system. So it goes way beyond just sort of the obvious spiritual meaning. But right now in today's world, just the spiritual meaning is enough to sort of focus just on that.
Okay, how would people begin to participate in going soul first?
Well, that's in some sense it's a hard question, and in some sense it's an easy question. But I think the most important thing is that, like, spirituality and religion and God, they're not what people think they are. I mean, the reason why it turns out a lot of words don't mean anything or seem to have relevance in today's society is because spiritual energy actually is what harmonizes and codifies everything, but it goes in cycles. Like the physical cycles we know go in days, weeks, and months. The mental cycles kind of go in decades and generations, but the spiritual cycles go in millenniums. So every 2,000 years or so, there's a new spiritual cycle. And when there's a new spiritual cycle, that's when the new religions come up. That's when everything clears. So the Mayan prophecy, that was the beginning of a spiritual cycle. And Jesus was the beginning of a spiritual cycle. And 2001, actually. So that was the beginning of a new spiritual cycle. And that's why these answers are all being revealed and we're all waking up. But this is a spiritual cycle unlike any other, because it doesn't just reset itself every 2,000 years. It lines up with sort of the original spiritual cycle where it was man, woman, and God, and the first energy when it was pure. So that's why there's this evolution taking place, because it's literally the vortex of time zero.
How do we tap into this energy that is man, woman, and God?
Well, in some sense, it's easy, but it's so rather than thinking of like God or spirituality as something outside of just sort of joy and happiness in your world, it's more like it's the energy that as a child you feel on your birthday or Christmas, or as a young adult you might feel getting married or having a baby, or any kind of big life event that brings a lot of joy and bliss into your life. That's when you're automatically going soul first. But the reason we're not used to that is society has been wired mind first, because that's the evolution of it. Like first, every reset, it sort of starts again. The whole concept of gematria, which is what all of this is based on, is that there's three energy forces altogether. There's spiritual energy, positive energy, and negative energy. And then there's 10 dimensions. And the first 5 dimensions are in the physical world, and they're body, mind, soul, time, and God. And then the next 5 are in the invisible metaphysical world, and they're past, present, future, faith, and trust. And then once you have all 10 dimensions, that's personal enlightenment, and that's dimension 11. That's gematria. And once everybody has personal enlightenment, that's dimension 12. That's R12. That's collective conscious, and that's what's happening. So basically, you know, if you take the macro cycle, since like if Christ was a reset point, you know, the first 1,000 years since that were kind of body. It was wars, blood, weapons. And then the last 1,000 years have kind of been mind, you know, religion, architecture, science. So we're just starting this 1,000 years of spirituality cycle, and the micro cycle since 2000, you know, we're at 2012. So it's kind of the spiritual cycle in the macro and the collective conscious in the micro, and that's why it's an awakening. So in some sense, it used to be sort of going against the grain to go soul first, and so people didn't do it. They were sort of told you don't bare your soul in public and stuff. But now it's sort of to have the wind at your back to go soul first. So literally, on some level, it's just every day is your birthday, every day is your wedding day, and it's just sort of seeing the best in people. The fundamental principles of go soul first are assume the best of yourself, assume the best of everybody. Everyone and everything is the world's best. And, you know, I've got a few examples of kind of how we can see the difference between going soul first or going mind first. In the craziest ways that what 2012 is, it's sort of the end of the time of God and the time of the universe. Literally what's happening right now is like God was the creator, and literally it's the end of his time, and he's sort of entered the universe. So now God and the universe are one. And that's called gematria. And what was sort of missing, what was happening in the universe, is the universe was sort of didn't have a soul anymore, and we had kind of lost our soul. And so there was no sort of soul to sort of restart the universe, and that's kind of what gematria is. It literally is like this sort of metaphysical crown that each of us wear, that the universe has and that God has, and it sort of repowers the universe. So literally, when I wrote that book, it looked like it could be the end of time. But then when I finished gematria, and recently in 2012, sort of like it entered the universe and the universe restarted. So we're not at the end of time anymore, because that's sort of what God brought to us as this gift. But if we don't sort of line up with the universe and become a collective conscious, we're sort of out of sync with God. So basically we have time again, but we need to sort of switch our polarities to sort of move in the right direction.
Okay, now tell us how you see us lining up with the universe and switching our polarities.
Well, that's what's sort of amazing, is in some sense it's so simple. It's literally like we're out of sync. See, people think we can't agree, but it's not that we can't agree. It's that one person's in the body dimension, one person's in the mind dimension, one person is in the soul dimension, and one person, a lot of people are stuck in negative energy. Like, it's kind of a triangular circuit with spiritual energy on the top and positive energy on the left and negative energy on the right. And you can't really avoid negative energy, but you don't want to get stuck there. It's like a dangerous hairpin turn. You just kind of want to pass through it. But everybody's out of sync. There's 15 variables, 12 dimensions, and 3 energy forces. So what I'm trying to do with gematria on 12, 12, 12 is sort of reset everything. So it's literally as simple, although it's impossible, is if we could all agree to go soul first, and we could all sort of say one thing and start over again on 12, 12, 12, our world would be perfect. Like, basically God came and sort of cleaned everything up in the last 6 months, and if we could just shut everything down and turn off all the noise and turn off all the chaos and just sort of start out again as if it was our birthday on 12, 12, 12, and we would learn how to agree instead of disagree, we would find that all these things are different now, and we kind of live in a magical place, in a magical universe, in a magical time. So literally, it's just getting people to agree, but you have to kind of start simple. You have to kind of say, is the sky blue? Yes, it is. Is the sun out? Yes, it is. Is soul first better than mind first? I really think if you sort of prove it to people and explain it, it is on every level. Soul first means being the best. It doesn't mean having the most. It means being the best. If you want to be the best athlete, or you want to be the best spouse, or you want to be the best parent, or you want to be the best at your profession, it's all about going soul first. That's actually how we do our best. It's kind of a obvious but really misunderstood concept.
But being the best sort of suggests, first off, that you're better than somebody else and some kind of scale or other which keeps hierarchy going, and also that you constantly have to be striving for what you're not rather than accepting what you are. I don't think that's what you mean, but it's a little bit of what I'm hearing. So I'd like you to speak to that.
No, it's a good point, because it's definitely not what I mean. We absolutely each can be our best, and it absolutely is within exactly what we do, because literally it's a win-win. There's no reason we all can't be at our best. And all your best means is think about the best days you've had, the best things you've had. It's totally the opposite of what you said, but I'm glad you brought it up. We all can be our best, and we've all been our best. It's something that's easy to do.
Okay, so we're not talking about a competitive.
No, it's a win-win for everybody. Everybody can be their best all at once. It's not a zero sum at all. And see, what I'm saying is that the way God and the universe works is God and the universe sort of go from the beginning of time until the end of time. So when the Big Bang started, that's when God started keeping track of time, all the way up until now. But the human race doesn't do it that way. We sort of start over every generation, and we kind of get stuck in this mind first thing. Like when you look at the Olympics and the athletes, we expect them to be perfect, but we don't expect like the election to be perfect, because we're not in sync at that point. But if we'd gone back to like the beginning of the human race, like a computer, and kept track of all the mistakes that we've made for the last 2,000 years, we wouldn't make mistakes anymore. But we sort of live one generation at a time and keep repeating our mistakes. So in some sense, that's not the way a computer works. A computer makes less mistakes. An athlete makes less mistakes. But the human race seems to has been repeating a lot of its mistakes. But the best thing about Go Soul First is that it's nobody's fault. There's no bad guys. There's no villains. It's just that now, for the first time in history, that's what 2012 is about. So what I was going to get to is, so God has been giving us 100% energy, but the only sort of untapped energy left in the universe is sort of everybody on this planet. Like this whole planet is kind of a Christ planet. Like we came along later. We were like the, immaculate conception of the universe. And so really we're the ones that are supposed to take over at this point. So it's pretty awesome. Like the whole planet is sort of the savior of the universe. A man can't be a savior, but a planet can. And so if you think of sort of everybody's energy that the average person puts out versus like an Olympic athlete or someone as awesome as Oprah Winfrey, one person going from just an average person to an Oprah Winfrey type superhero is a lot of energy that gets put out there. Well, if you did that with everybody on the planet, that would literally sort of light the sky on fire. And that's the kind of power that this shift can have. If we literally just go soul first, we literally will all be superheroes. It's like, do you want to be right or do you want to be a superhero? That's like my main sort of point about going soul first.
Okay. I've kind of lost track of my question, but it will come right back.
Well, I mean, I can sort of talk. I wanted to talk about like the difference between the Olympics versus the election, if that's okay.
Oh, okay. That's great. Go on that.
I mean, every 4 years, it's the strangest thing. We all watch the Olympics, and it's awesome. Somehow the IOC puts together an incredible event that brings everybody in the world together, and the men are the best, and the women are the best, and we are all our best, and we're all inspired, and it's just positive, positive, positive. And then this election comes, and it's all negative, and we're all pointing out and seeing the worst in each other, and dividing each other, and they're asking us for money for a broken system. Clearly the system is broken, but nobody seems to change it. But in some sense, it would be so easy. It's like, there's probably a lot of things we'd have to do, but if we just took the Olympics, like everything in our society should be as good as the Olympics. The medical system, the government system, the education system, that's the minimum. So if you just sort of thought about the Olympics and thought about how you might redo the election system. If we're going to have a two-party system, that's okay. But just like the Olympics, each party should put forth its best man and woman for each position, but take the president. So if the Republicans, without spending a lot of time and, a lot of our money and stuff, found the best man and the best woman to be president, and the Democrats found the best man and the best woman to be president, and we elected a team, and then we appointed a team, and what the election could be about could be the to-do list for the team. So it should be up to them to put the best forward. Like it's up to us to find our best Olympic athletes. And then we would vote on what we want them to get done. And if they got everything done, they'd get reelected. We don't need all these elections. Or we might pay them half up front and half if they accomplish the to-do list. So for like right now, what the to-do list should be, is fix the system. The system is broken. And pay off all the debt and clean up the planet. It's like we shouldn't even be talking about stuff like abortion and all this sort of personal rights. Like we have to clean up our own mess before we can tackle sort of sacred subjects like that. But it's also like, I don't know, I look, but, we can't have a man and a woman now, but I look at all four of these candidates, and I see something great in all of them. Like I think, Barack Obama, that night he was elected, that was an act of God. That was like literally a heavenly night. And, he kind of had to save the system before he could tear it down. But he's a very special person. And like Joe Biden, I love because, he's not afraid to make mistakes. And it turns out there's no such thing as making mistakes. The more mistakes you make, the better you get. So I would tell him to make more mistakes and keep his passion and try to do something big. Like when you look at Ronald Reagan, everybody loves Ronald Reagan. They all think he was an awesome president. And he was. But he made mistakes. Every time he spoke, he said something silly or made a mistake. But he thought big, and he did big. So when he took down the Soviet Union, who cares about the mistakes he made? So I just think that like the whole concept of mistakes is sort of confused. And when I look at Mitt Romney, like he's a businessman. I worked at Bain and Company. That's an awesome place. And he's a spiritual guy. And I think that we need to put the soul back in the government and society, not the church, but the soul. And Paul Ryan seems really smart. So like, why don't we just elect all of them and just have it the 2012 goSOULfirst unity election and clean up the mess? Then everyone in the country could be inspired. Why do we have to spend all this money, have this election, and divide everything when we could just elect them both and clean it up? And like if you ask them all, they probably would admit it, or maybe not publicly, but like we can't fix this thing unless we're united. So why are we kidding ourselves? Like that's the kind of honesty and the higher truth that goSOULfirst means that people would respond to. Literally, if one of the parties just went out right now and said we should elect all of us and sort of do it as a team, like it wouldn't happen, but like that party would win because that's what we're waiting to hear, like an answer that's different. People talk about disruptive thinking, but they're really not they're not saying anything disruptive at all. Like that's disruptive thinking. That would change, everything.
It sounds almost as if you're suggesting we should reach consensus instead of an up-down vote of one goes up and one goes
yes.
down. I know Burl and I often say that one of the problems with the current world order or the current cultural view is that it's very much an either-or way of setting up antagonists, which are certainly going to create violence and destruction, when in fact we live in a both-and world. Instead of an either-or world, we live in a both-and world where we need to find a way to reach a consensus that meets everyone's needs, maybe not everyone's desires, but everyone's needs, everyone being not just human beings, but the earth herself and all of her creatures.
Well, that's the main thing that, like, if I could just get one message across in this video that could change everything, is that we've got 1 million people saying 1 million things. Like, everybody's turning out to be a guru, and they're just, coming up with one new thing, and then they're stopping in their tracks and trying to sell it to everybody. And what I wish I could show them is they're literally 20% off across this invisible bridge to heaven. Like, this big bridge is built now. It's come into existence in the last 10 years. And you can literally, you couldn't before, but now you can literally be enlightened in an instant and go all the way to heaven. But if every guru is going to stop 20% across the bridge, and when they find a new discovery and try to sell it to people, we're never going to get there, because each person is going to be waking up and having a billion discoveries all the time. So what I can't really explain to do justice is if we all just said go soul first, they would actually see that everything they're saying is go soul first, but we would all be unified in an instant, and as an entire race, we could move across that bridge in a second. The way it is now, everybody has to slow down every time some guru finds a new speck of, enlightenment and sells it to them. And so I'm not trying to pick on all these people that are sort of trying to do the shift and stuff, but like they're really kind of missing the point. We need to agree more than sort of be right. And that's I'm kind of sort of focused on them more than the people not, because like if they were really, they're all talking about collective conscious and coming together, but if they really understood what they were saying, why aren't they all one organization? Why aren't they all united? Why are they all working separately?
A conundrum that makes it very, very difficult to for progressives of any sort to make progress. But tell us about this bridge that you're talking about from heaven to earth, because clearly you see it. It sounds like you see it clearly, and I don't think many of the rest of us do. So can you tell us a little about how you discovered it and why why you're so sure that the bridge is fully intact now in the last 10 years?
Yes, I can. I mean, I'm certainly not claiming to be the only one or anyone at all, but just my version of it is, since the moment I was born, I've been thinking about who are we, what is God, what is the meaning of life 24/7, and I'm a pretty hard worker, and I sort of pushed myself as an athlete and an academic and an artist, and then literally it's all about sort of, figuring out who you are, because as you get to know yourself, you get to know God, and you get to know everyone and everything. So for me, the minute I saw those planes hit the building on 9/11, it was like something out of a movie. It was like some sort of circuitry lit up in my head, and in that instant, I knew everything. I had all the answers to the universe, and it was literally like I walked up to the plane and I pulled it out of the building, and it was like King Arthur pulling Excalibur out of the stone, and I had this sword, and attached to the sword was like a line, and it went up into the sky. And so I started climbing up the line, and literally it was as if I got to heaven. I felt I was in heaven. I felt God was there, and I knew that I had made it across that bridge. But at that point, the bridge was only sort of one rope, rickety bridge, and I tried to get my wife and my friends, and they all thought I went crazy, and I sort of lost everything because the bridge wasn't safe. So what I've been doing literally like 1 billion times a day is building that bridge out stronger. And now just my bridge is sort of the size of, 10 Golden Gate bridges and can sort of carry a lot of people at once. So it's safe. And I've sort of had my own sort of metaphysical crashes and burns and stuff. So now like I'm trying to take people on this bridge, and I've been like, that's what's sort of funny to me. Like people are waking up now, but since 2003, I've been sending this stuff out to Scientific American and Stephen Hawking and, all the biggest gurus on the planet. And I've been pumping this stuff out day and night for 10 years. And now people are just sort of getting a little bit up that bridge and acting like they found something. It's like my stuff's on the internet, exactly what God is, exactly how you do it. All of this stuff is out there. And I never saw much of it out there 10 years ago, and now it's popping up everywhere, but that's just the way it has to be. But I'm sort of already at the end of the bridge, kind of trying to get people to come and trying to work with people. But whenever I sort of go to sort of join up with people and stuff, they're all sort of invested in their own version and, making money on it and stuff more than sort of advancing. And so I guess that's just the way it's got to be. So I appreciate this chance to talk about it. But, it's all pretty awesome. It's just funny to me how people sort of, they don't really know where this bridge ends. They just sort of know they're getting somewhere, and that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to sort of literally change the election in an instant, change the world in an instant. Like this whole thing that sort of is wrong with society is that we're like, when you're young, it's not a bad thing to make a mistake, right? When a kid makes a mistake, he's just a knucklehead, and we all love a knucklehead. But somehow when we get older, it's like everybody takes everything so seriously, and we all care about money, and so we're afraid to make a mistake. But a mistake isn't a mistake. It's an opportunity to sort of learn and grow. There's basically three mistakes. There's a mistake that doesn't really matter. It's just kind of part of learning. Like an Olympic athlete's already made a bunch of mistakes. And then there's a mistake that's just kind of silly that, you are a knucklehead. And then there's like a serious mistake, like if you cheat on your wife or do something bad, that's serious. But there's even those, I look at those as like if you do something better by 10 times. For every serious mistake you make, if you just sort of push yourself 10 times harder and bring that much positive energy, then that's not even a mistake. And so that's kind of how you do it. Like you just sort of like push yourself into the universe and push yourself toward heaven. And when you fall, you get up and push harder, and there's a circuitry. And that's what gematria is. That's what goSOULfirst is. There's literally a crown. Like science is funny too. Like they're sort of now getting to this whole unified field, divine matrix thing. Well, that's exactly what goSOULfirst is. But somehow when they started out with the planets, and they got things smaller and smaller, and now they're, the size of, invisible, tiny specks. But when they got to things being about the size of a person's head, that's when they should have brought spirituality into it, because we literally have a metaphysical crown. And that metaphysical crown is sort of what unites us in this divine matrix, in the unified field. And that's what your soul is. Your soul is literally a multidimensional circuit that sort of connects you, so we move like a flock of birds or school of fish. And so, it's really like for the people that need the scientific answer of what goSOULfirst is, it's really sophisticated. But for the people that don't, it's really simple. And any kind of revolutionary idea, needs to be simple. So it's kind of, I like to say, it's the first step, it's the last step, it's the only step we need to be a complete collective conscious and change the world on 12-12-12. So what 12-12-12 is to me is like the first official day of the rest of all time, because I sort of want to stop the world and rest for a day and start again. And I'm not sure I'll be able to do that, but that's my dream.
If people are going to help you realize your dreams, they're going to need to know who Paul Rosenberg is and why they should believe your answers are any better than any of the other people who are working in this movement. Can you tell us a little about yourself and why we should believe you?
Sure. But my mother committed suicide when I was 12, and that was pretty tragic, and that sort of was kind of rocked my world, but I just sort of decided I was going to be positive about it and not negative, and I sort of felt this negative energy, this pain, and I literally found a way to redirect it and turn it into positive energy, and that was at a very young age, and then I just sort of became very goal-oriented. And so literally, I've kind of been an expert in 5 different things in a way that, most people, if they're good at one thing, they're sort of not going to try to do something completely different. But I literally started from the bottom to the top of 5 different things, and they were mainstream. So I was on the U.S. ski team, and I worked at Goldman Sachs and worked at Hollywood. And so now I've been on this spiritual journey. So in some sense, I'm more of a mainstream guy than a typical spiritual person. So that's kind of who I think I am. Like, I sort of want to sell this up mainstream. goSOULfirst is like as simple as I can think of, that just sort of unifies the world, that they just want to unite the world. And so I just sort of challenge people to say, do you disagree with goSOULfirst? Do you disagree that if we all could agree, things could change? Like, I think these are the best answers I've heard, because if they weren't, I would change them to whatever I heard that was better. Like, I challenge people to say, what's simpler than that?
Okay, now you mentioned several times gematria, and I'm sure that's an unusual term to us and to most of our listeners. Could you explain a little about what it is and how it fits into your idea about how we can get people to agree?
That's kind of what it is, that there's a geometric value to everything in the universe, because the whole reason we haven't been able to communicate with God and we haven't been able to understand God is He doesn't speak English. The whole language of the universe and spirituality is a higher conscious geometric language. It's a multidimensional language that sort of moves completely differently. And literally, gematria is that language. It is translated from sort of God and the universe kind of into English and into colors and geometric shapes. So literally it's the decoding of everything. It's the Holy Grail. It's everybody's been talking about it, and like that's what it is, but I'm having a hard time sort of getting the people who say they're looking exactly for it to sort of realize I found it. I know it's a crazy story, but I'm not crazy, just the story is. So literally it's like the missing piece that syncs everything together and the language that the universe and God speak.
Explain how geometry is related to this language.
Well, I mean, when you think about what's the one language that's the same in every culture, there's only one, and it's math. So it just turns out everything in the universe is mathematical, and science sort of had it right that we've got to sort of decode things mathematically, but there needs to be a spiritual element into that, and so that's where they got it wrong. So it's like these dimensions, instead of math just being 1, 2, 3, math is body, mind, soul. So literally, like, each dimension has a different shape. So body is a red triangle, mind is a green square, soul is a blue circle. And so literally it's sort of these higher conscious sort of concepts that mathematically sync into the universe. So if you think of like kind of a electromagnetic CPU in each of our souls, and that same CPU being what powers the universe, and that same CPU being what powers the higher power, then if all of those, if they're the exact same geometric shape, if they all lined up, then that's sort of what when all the lights go on, right? Is literally like all of these things shifting and sort of hitting complete synchronicity, and then all the lights go on. So gematria is literally the electromagnetic circuitry that's common in us and the universe and in God. And so literally but it's been buried because it's sort of at time zero, when it was the first man and the first woman, it was all lit up and it was pure. But then each generation after has kind of left a layer of ash and dust and toxins, so it's been covered up, so it hasn't been pure, so we haven't been able to know these answers. That's why people didn't figure it out, and that's why people sort of had these long, complicated things. But 9/11, like, punctured that sort of bag of toxins and ash from all these thousands of years, and it literally has evaporated. And so now it's like a neon light, and it's pure. And that's the good thing. The bad thing is people are sort of getting there 1 inch at a time and sort of stopping to talk about what they're discovering, and I'm kind of working from the pure circuitry of it the other direction and trying to say, you can know this in an instant. Here it is. Don't take 10 years, and don't try to sell everything to everybody. Just sort of keep going, and this is where you'll end up. This gematria is where we all end up. When this thing is over, the whole ascension, the whole awakening, when it's done, and we're at the ultimate place, will be exactly where gematria is right now. Maybe that's a better way to explain it.
You seem to be saying that gematria is a language that's already there in our collective unconscious, and that somehow we need to tap into, and yet I'm not feeling how to get to it.
Like right now we're sort of, everything's upside down and disconnected, so I know it does sound that way, but if you could sort of like clean up and purify everything, like you'd see it. You'd literally see on the left side of the earth would be a red triangle, and you'd literally see on the right side of the earth would be a green square, and you'd literally see on top of the earth would be a blue circle, and it would be this giant circuit. And then you could, if you could sort of see the invisible circuitry in each of us, you'd see that on the left is the red triangle, and on the right is the green square, and on top of our head is the blue circle. And so then you'd sort of see, oh, we all have the same circuitry. We all line up. And then I can teach you how that circuitry works, and you sort of act positive with your body. So you go to hug somebody, you sort of take action, you exercise, and then that gets you up to that higher place where your soul is a higher place. And then you're actually not even supposed to use your mind for thinking. Your mind is what brings you back down and grounds you, and then you go again. And so it's literally just a triangle from positive spiritual to negative, positive spiritual to negative. And so what mental illness is, like, there's really no such thing as mental illness, you know, in the future, because people just know what their circuitry is. Right now, everybody's wired backwards, and they're going mind first. And when they start going straight up and straight down, which is bipolar, it's because they're not going around the circuitry. The circuitry is like a bobsled track, or like a a racetrack for, cars. And once you're sort of in the circuitry, you go as high as somebody that might be manic, but you don't go low, and you go really fast. So you sort of have to find the stillness and sort of sense that sort of the square, the triangle, and the circle, and then sort of start moving again. So it's literally like you sort of know the circle. Well, you know the circle part of it, because you know how when you sort of go soul first, it's kind of a more of a knowing. It's not a thinking, it's a knowing, it's a certainty. Like that's when you're sort of going soul first, when you just have a certainty. And that's why gematria is complicated, and it's sort of like maybe the rocket ship that we can all fly in, but not everybody needs to know how to build the rocket ship. They're just going to want to fly in it. So the go soul first is literally just the flying, not how to build it.
Well, both Burl and I can testify that we have experienced those moments of absolute clarity where without thinking we simply know, a whole picture unfolds to it. But you suggest that the way to get there is by purifying ourselves. What are we purifying ourselves of, and what's the process of doing it?
That's a great question. It's basically kind of just shutting down. First, we have to find the stillness. We have to sort of just stop moving because we're moving the wrong direction, and then we have to sort of follow a certain circuitry, which is what I was saying. Act positive, go up, kind of find your soul, find your spirituality, think negative. So literally, it's more like taking out 99% of the stuff in your life and in your world that sort of is excess or extra. So literally, that's why when we kind of start over, we would just, see that everything has the same geometric shape, and it looks kind of like a Jewish star, but it's not a coincidence. It's because it's two inverse universes. It has nothing to do with Judaism. Literally, there's two inverse universes. So in each of us is sort of a prime circuit. That's what I call it. And that's a triangle that goes up, and that's your body, mind, and soul, and that's your personal circuit. And then there's an inverse triangle, and that's called the collective circuit. That's past, present, future. That's when we're connected to everybody. And then there's a circle around it that unifies everything. So that's why, if you've sort of noticed, there's different times in your life when you sort of get off track from, like, society, but you don't completely keep going. At some point, it, like, jerks you, right? Like, you get jerked back in with everybody else, or they sort of get jerked back in with you. And that's because there's these two inverse circuits, your circuit and the collective circuit. And so the way we sort of purify everything is just to kind of see the circuitry in each of us and see the circuitry in all of us and sort of stop doing everything that isn't in line with the circuitry.
Paul, I have a quick question in reference to this. A lot of the mystics throughout the various traditions talk a lot about being empty of yourself, being beyond conditioning, and I'm wondering how that relates to what you're talking about.
What that means is the purity. So like at time zero, the minute you're born, your circuitry is clean. It's perfectly, each dimension is perfect, and you're moving perfect. And so everything after that kind of becomes less perfect and more like dilutive and toxic. So if we just sort of go back to time zero, the circuitry is pure again and everything's pure. And, in the universe and in God, they don't use money and they don't speak English, so that's an example of sort of clearing yourself. Like those things aren't the pure organics of who we are. Like we don't know who we are, so we can't sort of get rid of everything that's who we aren't. But you basically live your life as a pure being that's gotten rid of everything. And so basically what this is, and this is how powerful it is, as opposed to just saying that, literally I can show you the circuitry and how you do it. And so once you know the circuitry, it's literally the roadmap of exactly how to live a pure existence. Whereas before, the concept was clear, but the circuitry wasn't clear. The sort of math of it wasn't clear. So literally, it's like just by knowing who you are with this geometric language, you can live a pure existence free of your excess, I guess, in yourself?
You seem to be bringing it down to the mathematical language to the simple level of the computer language. I have a problem with seeing that the human mind should become more like the computer instead of vice versa. I think the computer is a metaphor of our logic rather than us being a metaphor of some kind of pure computer logic.
Well,
am I making myself clear?
Yeah, you are. That's a great sort of misunderstood thing, because it turns out that the galaxy and the universe is one giant computer, but it's a spiritually powered computer. I don't know if you know what about the Akashic records, but that's sort of a sort of spiritual cosmic computer. That's exactly what it is. The Akashic records is a computer, and it's sort of powered by spiritual energy. So it's actually just going to turn out the opposite. Like, again, what we call math isn't 1, 2, 3 in the universe. It's body, mind, soul. And what you're thinking of when you say a computer isn't really what I'm thinking of when I say a computer. I'm saying the galaxy is sort of a computer, and our soul, not our mind, our soul is our computer CPU. So, like, if you kind of think of this is like the computer in the galaxy is like the ocean, and we're like the droplets. So we're all part of the ocean, right? Well, that's when I talk about a cosmic computer, I see the ocean, not sort of a machine that you're thinking of on your desk.
Okay, well that helps some because it makes it more organic and goes through cycles. And
the concept I would sort of say is, if you don't like the word computer, just kind of replace it with like perfection. Like when you think of computers, they're sort of perfection sort of at what they do. Well, when you think of the universe is perfection. Everything in the universe is perfect. It's all connected. We're all one. So when we say we're all one, that's a different way of saying perfect. That's a different way of saying computer. So when you think of perfect, all I'm saying is we're not perfectly lined up with ourselves and with the universe to be how that computer works. But literally, once we will, it's everything that is awesome about a computer. Just think if you didn't have to make decisions. Just think if you knew the perfect decision to make in every situation. You knew exactly what the pure truth was, and all you had to do it. You literally never had to think again. Well, that's what this is. You never think. You never make a decision, and then all of a sudden you start evolving in one dimension and then another dimension. And so right now we're sort of 2 to 3 dimensional mortals, and I'm talking about 12-dimensional superheroes, and all you have to do is shut everything down and connect soul first to the divine matrix, the unified field, and it literally happens automatically. So it's more like I'm trying to say to people, soul first is good on an obvious level. Well, I'm trying to say the power of it is it's 10 times more powerful.
If it's all already done for us, if it's all already codified, what happens to our creativity? What happens to what grows out of relationship? What happens to our sexuality?
Well, what's happened to it now? Let's take the internet, for example. There's really nothing happening on the internet that's sort of interesting. It's like Hollywood used to be awesome, but now they sort of broke the system by making these $500 million movies. And now the internet's just all over the place. There's no structure to it. There's no unification to it. And I'm telling you, we don't need 99% of the stuff in the world. It's not connected. It's not powerful. There's literally like a magic and a vibration to everything divine and everything connected to the universe. But we haven't been able to detect that for 2,000 years. But now we can. And so we literally don't need anything that's not vibrating at a high level. And what the answers are that are vibrating at a high level, and that's what everybody wants, because that's what a rock star does when he does a hit song. That's what an Olympic champion does when they win. That's what Oprah Winfrey did every time she did a show. Everybody wants to be their best. It's not about having the most. It's about an entire species being their best. It's all based on the holographic principle. And you've heard the scientists talking about a holographic principle. Well, it just turns out it's a solographic principle, because everything in the universe started with the Big Bang, and that's all spiritual energy.
And so spiritual energy is what harmonizes and unifies and codifies everything in the universe. I just want people to know there's no coincidences, and everything that's happened since the beginning of humanity has all been adding up to this time, and this is a window, and it's a miracle, and we are all divine creatures that are able to do things that no human's ever been able to do, including change the world and perfect the world in a week, and all we have to do is want it, and all we have to do is go soul first. And it's all about love and being your best and everything good. And people, please contact me at goSOULfirst@yahoo.com, or on LinkedIn. You can find me, Paul David Rosenberg, and there's a GoSoulfirst group. I'd like to have an event on 12/12/12 going to 12/23, where it's the first official day of the rest of all time, where we all come together and start the world over again.